So good afternoon, everyone. I am Yasser bin Ali M. Diongal, and I will be the first reporter of our group. So I am a BS Ed English student, and today I will discuss to you the independent clauses, major types of independent clause, such as the declarative clauses, interrogative clauses, and exclamative clauses, and lastly, imperative clauses will be further discussed by my groupmate. Okay, so let's continue. I will discuss in a slow pace so that everyone will catch up or can understand my um my discussion. So let's continue. So clauses. So clauses are groups of related words that contain a subject verb combination. So the verb must be a main or finite verb form. So, a verb is finite if it is found in a clause in combination with a subject and a tense. Remember that a finite verb forms show tense, person, and number. Okay? So, the ing or the infinitive forms cannot be the main verb. Again, the ing or the infinitive forms cannot be the main verb. So what is an infinitive forms? So the infinitive forms of a verb is usually preceded by the word to. Okay? So such as to run, to dance, and to think, for example. But take note that the infinitive form is not always preceded by to. So it is not always, it's usually not parang it's yes, it is not always preceded by the word to. So, for example, um, first is we have the incorrect example. The girl to run down the street. So, this is a fragment. So, what is a fragment? First, before that, what is a fragment? So, a fragment is a phrase or clause that looks like a sentence but does not express a complete thought. Again, it does not express a complete thought. By themselves, fragments make little sense and leave important questions unanswered. So it is a non-finite. So the verb run, it is not a non-finite because the verb does not have a tense and there is no agreement between the subject girl and the verb. So there is no agreement between the subject and the verb. So let's go discuss the correct one. So the girl runs down. So this is a finite verb, the word runs. So a verb is finite if it is found in a clause in combination with a subject in a tense and a tense. So again, a verb is what you call this finite if it is found in a clause in combination with a subject and a tense. So as discussed by the previous reporters, finite verb forms show tense, person, and number. So finite verb forms show tense, person, and number. As this, for example, so the girl runs, so it agree between the subject girl agrees with the verb run. So the girl is singular, the verb is with s. So if the girl is plural, for example girls, the verb run will be without s. So let's proceed. The girl running down the street, so it is another fragment. So the correct one will be the girl is running down the street. So the girl is running down the street. So the word is here is a copular verb. Okay? So is what is known as a state of being verb. So state of being verbs do not express any specific activity or action, but instead it describe its being. So like in this example, is a copular verb that identify or describe the girl's being. So the girl's being or condition is running. So we have the subject and we have the verb. Now let's proceed. Independent clauses. Independent clauses, also called main clauses, so can be punctuated as separate sentence. They may be long or short. Each independent or main clause has one subject-verb combination in it. Okay? So, each independent or main clause has one subject-verb combination in it. So, all independent clauses are finite. That is, they contain a finite verb form which specifies tense. For example, is and look, for example, and or or modality. Yes, or modalities such as can and would. Always remember that an independent clauses express a complete thought and can stand by themselves as sentences. So, for example, of example of an independent clauses. So, running down the street, chasing the bus to school, Greg shouted loudly after it to stop and pick him up. Okay? So, there is only one subject main verb combination in the sentence. So, what is that? So, the one subject main verb is Greg shouted. Other forms in this sentence that are verb forms are such as chasing, and to stop, and pick him up, like the pick up. None of these forms can be the main verb in the sentence. So our main verb here is Greg shouted. As you can see, there is a agreement between the subject and the verb. So here are some or several examples. Greg ran down the street. So we have the subject and we have the verb. Greg chased the bus down the street. So we have the subject and verb, same as it follows. Greg shouted at the bus driver to stop for him. So there is an agreement between the um, subject and the verb. Okay, Greg will be late for tomorrow. Uh, late for sorry, Greg will be late to work. The next bus will stop to pick Greg up. So these are some examples. So there is um, these sentences are independent clauses. So all of these sentences are independent clauses. So they have a subject and a verb. They do not have a subordinating conjunction or relative pronoun that would make them dependent. Okay? So independent clause can be coordinated and they can include embedded um, dependent clause. So, for example, we have coordinated independent clause. So, coordinated independent clause, it has two or more independent or coordinated clause. So, for example, he was crying and so I gave him his jacket. Or I gave him back his jacket. So he was crying. So this can be considered as an independent clause because it gives us a complete thought and it has a subject and a verb. Okay? And so this is a coordinate conjunction, and so I gave him back his jacket. So it is another example of independent clause. So it also gives a complete thought. So it also has a subject and verb, subject I and gave as a verb. Next is will be complex independent clause. Complex independent clause, it has one or more dependent clause. Oh, okay. So for example, if you pay too much, they'll give us the money back. So what is the dependent clause in the example? So the dependent clause will be the if you pay too much. So why is that? If you pay too much is the subordinate is the dependent clause, because it starts with a subordinating conjunction if. So it starts with the subordinating conjunction if. Yes. The dependent clause, then this does dependent clause, then we have the next will be the independent clause. They'll give us the money back. Okay, so it gives a complete thought and has a finite verb. So it have a tense and agreement between the subject and the verb. Okay, so the four clauses kinds are discussed in detail below, with emphasis on both form and related speech act function. So declaratives to clarify statement. It is the statements, interrogatives, imperatives, and exclamatives. So are the four fundamental forms of main clauses. So these are the four fundamental forms of main clauses. So let's continue to declarative clauses. A declarative sentence, also known as a declarative clause, is a statement that declares something. Yes, declarative statements consist of a subject and a predicate. So before that, what is a predicate? So predicate is the part of a sentence that contains the verb and gives information about the subject. Okay, continue. And are the most common type of sentence in the English language. Yes. A declarative clause expresses an active state of being in the present tense. Okay. May I repeat that? Um, a declarative clause expresses an active state of being in the present tense. In a declarative clause, the subject generally precedes the verb, or the subject come before the verb, and it almost always ends with a period. So it almost always ends with a period. Normally, a declarative clause conveys an information. So continue. A simple declarative sentence is made up of a subject and a predicate. So that is predicate, similar to how a subject and verb in the present tense are combined. So for example, we have Lily loves gardening. So we have the Lily as the subject, loves gardening. So predicative complement. Yes. So declarative clauses are generally concluded with a period. So as you can see at the example above, simple declaratives, it concluded with a period. Although they can also be worded as a question. So how is that? So declarative. So for example, she did leave a message. She did leave a message. So it is a declarative question. Declarative question. So a declarative question is asked in order to clarify information. That is the purpose of the declarative question, is to clarify information. In in a declarative sentence or declarative statement rather, the subject comes first. Okay? In a declarative statement, the subject comes first, followed by the verb. Another simple method to distinguish the two phrases is to replace the question mark in each with a period. Okay? If you punctuated a declarative phrase with a period, it would still make sense. For example, did she leave a message? So this is incorrect because as you can see, it is this sentence conveys or signifies a question or seeking for an information. Did she leave a message? So it is not what they all suited with a period. So the correct one would be she did leave a message. So you can determine if for example, this two example has a question mark, and you will determine which is a declarative question. So just simply um, change the question mark with a period. If uh, if the period agrees or is suited with the sentence, it is the declarative question. You found the declarative question. Okay, so let's move interrogative clauses. Interrogative clauses. Yes. An interrogative clause asks a direct inquiry and is followed by a question mark. Interrogative phrases clauses you to acquire information, clear up confusion, and engage in engaging dialogues with others. Yes. It may also be used as an organizing technique in writing. So yeah. So the difference between the interrogative clauses is asked in order to obtain information, while a declarative question is asked in order to clarify information. So remember that interrogative clauses is asked in order to obtain information, and declarative clause is asked to in order to clarify information. Okay. Um, an interrogative clause may be identified by two structural indicators that frequently occur together. So a verb subject structure and a beginning WH word. So these are the two structural indicators that frequently occur together. So moving on, independent interrogative clauses are classified into three types. So these are WH questions, yes or no questions, and alternative questions. So this will be my focus in my report. What I mean is I will discuss this further later. So the three types or the independent integrative clauses are classified into three types. So these WH questions, yes or no questions, and alternative questions. So their primary applications are to obtain missing information. So and to in and to determine if a statement is true or false, and also to determine which of two or more option is correct. So again, their primary application or uses are to obtain missing information and to determine if a statement is true or false, and to also to determine which of two or more options or choices is more correct or is correct. Okay, an interrogative clause, like other full sentences in English, must have a subject and a verb. However, in this case, the word order is generally reversed, with the verb coming before the subject. Again, with the verb coming before the subject. For example, when is the deadline? The subject of this phrase is deadline. Okay? The subject of this phrase is deadline. And the verb is verb is it is our verb. The verb is our verb. The verb is. In a direct query, the verb comes before the subject. So the verb comes before the subject, which means, or in this example, the verb comes, so followed by the deadline subject. Okay, so this is an example of an interrogative clauses. So the verb comes or the verb comes or the verb is followed by the subject. Now, what usual word order is the the usual word order is WH word plus auxiliary or modal verbs. So plus subject plus verb plus X. Okay? So for example, what are you doing? So our auxiliary verb here is are. So first is we have WH question, then followed by are, which is our auxiliary verb, then subject you, then verb doing. So this, uh, what are you doing? WH question, auxiliary verb, subject, then verb. Next is does she play tennis well? So our word does is a auxiliary, then she is our subject, then play is our verb, then tennis well will be our predicative complement. So when we say a predicative complement, uh, a predicative complement completes the meaning of a sentence by giving information about a noun. So it gives information about a noun. So play tennis well. Okay. Now let's move on. Next is we have the WH questions. So WH questions begin with a WH word that refers to a missing element. So that refers to a missing element in the clause. The missing element can be a clause element such as subject, object, predicative, and adverbial, or part of a phrase. So first is we have, so below, as you can see, number one, number one, who is calling or who's calling. So at this, we can see at these examples 1 to 8, we can see the role of WH word. So the role of who is or who's calling is the word who is subject. So the role of who is a subject. And we have what as our direct object. What did you mean? Or what do you mean? So it is our direct object. What is our direct object? And we have who are you talking about? So it is our prepositional object. Who is our prepositional object. And then we have how was your trip, Nick? How was your trip, Nick? So it is our subject predicative. Then we have which photos are we going to look at? So this which photos or is part of noun phrase. When is our adverbial time. Why, so it is our adverbial and time. What they mean is adverbial and reason. And how is part of adjective phrase. If you can notice from one that the declarative order is subject verb. So there are subject verb. Yes. So that the declarative order is subject verb is reserved when the WH word is the subject. So subject, then verb, who is calling, who is calling, who is calling. Um, when the so number one, that the declarative order SB is preserved when the WH word is the subject of the clause. Now, all the other examples shows VS or verb then subject order. That is, the operator comes before the subject. When when the subject and operator are switched in a sentence, it is called subject operator inversion. Again, when a subject and operator are switched in a sentence, it is called subject operator inversion. So when we say operator, an operator is a verb form that can come first in a question. So for example, uh, what do you mean? So what do you mean? So our uh, so we have the do, what, or what did as an operator. Who are you calling? So we have the are as an our operator, then you subject. How was operator, then how was, then which photos, as you can see that um in these examples that op the operator an operator is when an operator and the subject are switched in a sentence. So all the examples show verb then subject except for the number one. Okay. Ah, with that. So interrogative clauses are classified as either clause or open interrogative based on the possible answers. So the range of replies for clause interrogatives is limited to yes or no. So other responses such as I am not sure or I don't know are possible, but they don't actually address the question. So for example, we have this, did she help them? Yes or no. Are you planning parties? Yes or no. Yeah. So it is a clause interrogatives. So clause interrogatives have a unique word order in which the subject follows after the verb, considering the following examples. So you are planning parties. As you can see, the subject follows the verb. Are you planning parties? So first is you are planning parties is a declarative, and then the are you planning parties, the second example, is a clause interrogative. So clause interrogative. Mm-mm. Okay. So when we convert this declarative into a clause interrogative, the order of the subject and the auxiliary verb is reversed. This is referred to as subject-verb inversion. So these are known as open interrogative because they can have an unlimited number of possible replies. So these are examples of open interrogative. So they can have a unlimited number of possible replies. It can be in like for example essay or paragraph or long and short replies. So here are several examples. Example: who told you that? And what did you get? When did you get married? So open interrogatives are typically introduced by WH word. such as what, who, when, where, why, or how. You can see the examples can have a possible or unlimited replies. Who told you that? One told me is this and that and then and we like that, for example. So there will be a possible reply, unlimited number of possible replies. When did you get married, for example? So yes or no question. Yes or no question have VS or verb subject word order. The operator comes first, followed by the subject. So the recipient is supposed to respond with a yes or no answer. Needless to add, there are numerous alternative responses reflecting varying degrees of certainty or doubt. For example, absolutely, possibly, I don't know, and so on. So, for example, is it Thursday today? Yes or no? No, Friday. Do you think he will be any better or he'll be any better? Maybe, yeah. We form yes or no questions with an auxiliary verb be, do, or have. So, for example, like that. So, plus subject plus main verb or with a modal verb plus subject plus main verb. So, we form yes or no questions with an auxiliary verb be, do, or have plus subject plus main verb or with a modal for with a modal verb plus subject plus main verb. So for example, is she working? So we have the auxiliary verb is and then plus subject she plus main verb working. Yeah. So next is have they eaten? We have the auxiliary verb have, subject they, and main verb eaten. Another, should I open the window? So first is we have the modal verb plus subject I, then plus main verb open, and then lastly the window. Casual yes or no questions frequently contain ellipses. So for example, you all right? And then got what you want, like that, for example. So in the first example, you all right? So the word are is omitted or erased this at this example. It's supposedly are you all right? But in casual yes or no question, frequently it contains ellipses. So the word are is omitted. Same as to the second example, got what you want. But um, it's more the word have you are is omitted. So it's supposedly have you got what you want. But because it is in a casual yes or no question, there it contains or it frequently contains ellipsis. So have you in the word have you in the second sentence or second example is omitted. Have you got what you want? Then have you was omitted is omitted. Then it turns to got what you want. Got you want? Got what you want. Got what you want. Mhm. So like WH questions, yes or no questions are used for purposes other than for purposes. Yes or no questions are used for purposes other than asking for information for purposes. So for example, isn't that lovely? Next will be number two. Will you be will you behave? Then lastly, can we turn that light off, please? Yes. So the interrogative construction in number one expresses an exclamation as in how wonderful. For example, how wonderful. Isn't that lovely? Or isn't that lovely? So it expresses an exclamation. And then second, will you behave? Will you behave? Or is a directive. So number two is a strong demand. And a courteous request is in number three. Can we turn that light off, please? So that is an example of a courteous request. And these are examples of W. These are examples of yes or no questions. Okay. So yes or no questions, especially in conversation, usually have the simplest form operator plus subject. For example, operator, she is a teacher. Then, oh, is she? So this, uh, so the operator is the word is, and then subject is the teacher plus subject. Okay, and as you can see, these elliptic questions are not really asking for information. They rather functions as back channels. So as a back channels. So it's showing interest and keeping the conversation going. Next is we have the alternative questions. So alternative questions is structurally similar to a yes or no question. It opens with operator plus subject, yes. But instead, it opens with operator plus subject. But instead of expecting a yes or no answer, it it gives or it presents alternatives for the addressee to choose between. So, for example, we have, do you want one or two? So there is an alternative. So the person asked answered two. Another example. So do you like my haircut or not? Then he answered, it's all right. An alternative question is signaled by the word or and by falling intonation at the end. So, for example, do you want one or two? So there's a or and there's a falling intonation at the end. So this is all for independent interrogative clauses because independent interrogative clauses are only classified into three types: WH questions, yes or no questions, and alternative questions. So let's move to exclamative clauses. So exclamative clauses, exclamation can be expressed by a range of structure, both clausal and non-clausal. Here we illustrate only independent clauses with an exclamatory function. A clause type which begins with a WH word, what or how, and continues with an subject, verb, or SV pattern. So for example, oh, what a good girl you are. Second is how clever you are. So as you can see at the example, you will create an independent clause with an exclamatory function. So it begins with a WH word and continues with an SV pattern. WH, what, and then we have the subject, then verb, same as the how clever you are. How is our IWH word, then clever, then you is our subject, then are is our verb. Okay? In English grammar, an exclamatory sentence is a type of main clause that expresses strong feelings. in the form of an exclamation, as opposed to sentences that make a sentence uh, that makes a statement rather. So as opposed to sentences that make a statement, um, or expresses commands or ask a question. An exclamatory sentence, also known as an exclamatory clause, usually concludes with an exclamation point. Yes, usually, but not always. So other phrase kinds, particularly declarative sentences, can be employed to produce exclamation with the right intonation. A powerful sensation or sense of eagerness is expressed in an exclamatory statement. The way you speak, how you highlight key phrases, and how you accent your words can all change the meaning and even the urgency of your sentence. So let's move to the three-dimensional grammar framework. So for example, for clauses, we have I eat. So how does it form? Subject, I, then plus a verb, eat. So it gives a complete thought. So clauses. And then its meaning. A clause consists of a subject and a verb and is the smallest grammatical unit that expresses a thought. Then use. A clause in grammar is made up of a subject and a verb in its simplest form. The subject is the entity that is doing the sentence's action, while the verb is the action on that the subject completes. A clause is a part of thought that completes it, an idea or statement that can stand alone. So independent clauses. Sharon speaks loudly. So we have Sharon as our subject plus verb speak or predicate. It results to complete thought, predicative complement. So meaning an independent clause is a group of words that contains a subject. So earlier we saw the subject and verb and expresses a complete thought. An independent clause is a sentence. So all independent clauses are finite. That is, they contain a finite verb form which specifies tense or modality. There is only one subject main verb combination in the sentence. There's only one subject main verb combination in the sentence. Then we have declarative clauses. For example, Lily loves gardening. So we have subject Lily plus verb predicate. Then we have the um, complete thought. Then we have declarative sentences, meaning are simply statements that rely information. They are most common type of sentences in the English language. A declarative sentence states the fact or an opinion and the let the reader know something specific. So a declarative sentence is written in present tense and expresses a direct statement. It can be a simple or compound sentence. So a simple declarative sentence consists of a subject and predicate. The, the subject generally precedes the verb and it always ends with a period. Next is we have the interrogative clauses. So for example, what are you doing? So the usual word order is WH word are plus verb or auxiliary verb are. We have the are, then plus subject you, then plus subject verb you doing. Okay, what are you doing? An interrogative clause asks a direct inquiry and is followed by a question mark. Interrogative phrases clauses allow you to acquire information, clear up confusion, and engage in engaging dialogues with others. So the use will be an interrogative clause may be identified by two structural indicators that frequently occur together: a verb subject structure and a beginning WH word. Its primary use is to obtain missing information, to determine if a statement is true or false, and to determine which of two or more options or choices is correct. Now, exclamative clauses. Example, what a lovely sister you are. So what, WH word plus noun, the lovely sister plus subject you plus verb are. Okay, you are. meaning an exclamatory clause is a type of main clause that expresses strong feelings in the form of an exclamation, as opposed to sentences that makes a statement. So declarative expresses commands, eh, deca- express commands or ask a question. So interrogative. So the usual function or job of an exclamative sentence is to help the speaker express a strong opinion about a situation. An exclamatory statement, it expresses our personal and magnified assessments of the situation. Thank you. That is all. Thank you for watching. God bless and goodbye.